Embrace the ultimate hope that defeats evil and transforms your future. We begin in a dimly lit room where a man sits alone, his face illuminated by the faint glow of a single candle. His hands tremble as he clutches a crumpled photograph, a token of a life shattered by betrayal. The silence around him speaks volumes about his despair. This is where many of us have found ourselves, on the brink, battling an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. But what if I told you that in this very moment, when all seems lost, the key to the ultimate hope that defeats evil and transforms your future is waiting to be discovered? You see, hope isn't a fleeting emotion. It's not a vague wish or a naive dream. It's a force, a power capable of redefining everything you think you know about yourself and the world. But where does such hope come from? How do we embrace it? And more importantly, how does it defeat the evil that seems so entrenched in our lives and in the world around us? These are the questions we'll explore together. But first, let me ask you this: when was the last time you truly believed that your life could be radically transformed? In the teachings of Christ, we find a roadmap, not just to personal healing, but to a hope that can conquer darkness itself. Consider his words in the Sermon on the Mount: "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." In a world fueled by division, where conflict often feels inevitable, what does it mean to be a peacemaker? Is it merely the absence of fighting? Or does it require something deeper, a willingness to love those who despise you, to forgive those who have wounded you? I think of Sarah, a woman who faced an unthinkable betrayal. Her husband of 20 years left her for someone else. And in her anger, she wanted revenge. Yet, something inside her whispered, "Forgive." At first, the idea seemed impossible. How could she forgive the man who tore her life apart? But as she reflected on the words of Christ, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us," she realized that forgiveness wasn't for her husband's sake, it was for her own. It was her path to freedom. And so, trembling, she chose to forgive. In that moment, she felt a weight lift, a weight she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. This is the power of hope rooted in love and forgiveness. But let's not romanticize it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing wrongdoing. It means choosing to rise above the evil done to us. It means saying, "You do not have the power to control my heart." And isn't that what hope truly is? The refusal to be defined by darkness. Yet, embracing such hope requires faith, a word that's often misunderstood. Faith isn't blind or irrational. It's a courageous trust in something greater than ourselves. When Christ walked on water, his disciple Peter stepped out of the boat to join him. For a moment, Peter walked on the waves. But then fear crept in, and he began to sink. How often are we like Peter? We take a step toward hope, but the storms of life, our doubts, our failures, pull us under. Here's the profound truth: hope doesn't eliminate the storm. It empowers us to walk through it. Christ reached out his hand to Peter, pulling him up. And he does the same for us. But here's the question we often avoid: are you willing to reach back? I know this can feel overwhelming. After all, the world is full of evil, war, poverty, greed. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of such overwhelming darkness. But let me share a story that might change your perspective. In a remote village, a young boy named David lived in poverty. Every day, he watched his family struggle to put food on the table. One day, a stranger came to the village, bringing supplies and offering to teach the children how to farm sustainably. At first, David was skeptical. Could one person really make a difference? But as he learned and began to see the crops grow, something shifted inside him. For the first time, he saw the potential for change, not just in his life, but in his community. Years later, David returned to the village, not as a boy, but as a man determined to pass on what he had learned. What began as a single act of kindness had multiplied, transforming countless lives. This is the ripple effect of hope. It starts small, a single seed planted in the soil of our hearts. But when nurtured, it grows into something unstoppable. And isn't that exactly what Christ taught? That the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, the smallest of seeds. But when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants, providing shelter for all who come to it. So, let me ask you, what seed are you planting today? Are you sowing bitterness, fear, and doubt? Or are you cultivating love, courage, and hope? The choice is yours. But here's the catch: the seeds you plant will not only shape your future, they will influence the world around you. Now, let's talk about transformation, because hope isn't just about survival, it's about thriving. To transform your future, you must confront the lies you've believed about yourself. Maybe you've been told you're not good enough, that your past defines you, or that your dreams are unattainable. But the teachings of Christ reveal a different narrative. He said, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden." Imagine that for a moment. You are a light, not just a flicker, but a beacon capable of piercing the deepest darkness. Yet, being a light requires action. It means stepping out of the shadows and living with purpose. For some, this might mean pursuing a dream you've buried out of fear. For others, it might mean reaching out to someone in need, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Transformation begins with small, consistent steps. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. As we approach the end of this first part, I want to leave you with a challenge. Take a moment to reflect on this question. What would your life look like if you fully embraced the hope that Christ offers? Not halfway, not with reservations, but completely. Imagine the freedom, the peace, the courage you would feel. And then ask yourself, what's holding me back? The courage to confront evil and the faith to redefine your future. We often shy away from confronting evil. It's easier, isn't it, to look the other way, to convince ourselves that someone else will step in, that it's not our responsibility. But here's a truth we can't ignore: evil thrives in silence. And sometimes, that silence comes not from fear of the world, but from fear of what we might uncover within ourselves. What is evil? Really? Is it only the atrocities we see on the news? The wars? The injustices? The violence? Or is it also the quiet, insidious ways we let fear, greed, and apathy take root in our own hearts? Christ's teachings challenge us to confront this uncomfortable truth. When he said, "Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you," he wasn't just asking us to be kind to those who are difficult, he was calling us to wage a battle against the darkness within and around us. But how do you love your enemies when every fiber of your being screams for revenge? How do you find the courage to confront evil when it feels so much bigger than you? These are not rhetorical questions, they are the essence of what it means to embrace hope. Let's unpack this together. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads. To one side is the familiar path, well-trodden and easy. It's the path of avoidance, where you pretend not to see the injustices around you, where you justify your inaction by saying, "What can I do? I'm just one person." To the other side is a narrow, rocky trail. It's steep. It's treacherous. And it demands everything from you. But this is the path of hope. It's the path Christ walked, the path of truth, courage, and sacrifice. Let me share a story that embodies this choice. There was a man named Michael, a teacher in a struggling neighborhood plagued by gang violence. He could have done the bare minimum, just taught his classes and gone home. But he saw the fear and hopelessness in his students' eyes. And he knew he couldn't stay silent. Michael began holding after-school programs, teaching not just math and science, but also respect, discipline, and hope. He faced threats, vandalism, and even physical attacks. But he persisted. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Students who once saw violence as their only future started to dream of something more. Michael's courage didn't just confront the evil in his community, it inspired others to do the same. Now, think about your own life. What evils are you turning a blind eye to? Maybe it's a toxic relationship, a workplace injustice, or even a destructive habit you've ignored for too long. And here's the real question: what would it take for you to choose the narrow path? The one that demands courage but leads to transformation? Courage alone, however, is not enough. To truly confront evil and transform your future, you need faith, a faith that anchors you, guides you, and gives you the strength to keep going when the road gets hard. But let's be honest, faith is hard. It's not something you can summon on command. It's something you build, brick by brick, through trust and surrender. Consider the story of Christ calming the storm. The disciples were terrified, their boat battered by waves, and they cried out, "Lord, save us." And Christ's response? "Why are you afraid? O you of little faith?" He wasn't scolding them, he was inviting them to see beyond the storm, to trust that even in the chaos, he was with them. How often do we forget this? How often do we let fear dictate our actions because we forget that we're not alone? Faith, like courage, is a choice. It's choosing to believe in a hope greater than ourselves, even when the evidence around us suggests otherwise. It's choosing to trust that the light will prevail, even when all we see is darkness. And here's the paradox: the more you exercise faith, the stronger it becomes. It's like a muscle. The first step feels impossible, but with each step, you find strength you didn't know you had. But let's not overlook the practical side of this. Faith isn't just a spiritual concept, it's deeply practical. It changes how you think, how you act, and how you approach challenges. When you operate from a place of faith, you're not paralyzed by fear. Instead, you're empowered to take action. Think of David facing Goliath. His faith didn't eliminate the giant, it gave him the courage to step onto the battlefield. Now, let's bring this home. What giants are you facing right now? Maybe it's financial struggles, a failing relationship, or a dream that feels out of reach. What would happen if you faced those giants with faith instead of fear? What if you believed, truly believed, that you are equipped to overcome them? This brings us to the transformative power of hope. Hope is not passive. It's not sitting back and waiting for things to get better. It's active, relentless, and bold. It's waking up every day and choosing to fight for a better future, no matter how daunting the odds. And here's the thing, hope is contagious. When you live with hope, you inspire others to do the same. It's a ripple effect that starts with you and spreads far beyond what you can see. Let me share one final story for this part. There was a woman named Elena who had lost everything, her home, her job, her family, in a natural disaster. For months, she lived in despair, feeling abandoned and forgotten. But one day, as she sat in the ruins of her life, she noticed a single flower blooming amidst the rubble. It was a tiny thing, easily overlooked. But to Elena, it was a sign. It reminded her that life persists, even in the face of destruction. That small moment of hope gave her the strength to rebuild not just her life, but the lives of others in her community. Today, Elena runs an organization that provides aid to disaster survivors, spreading the same hope that once saved her. So, I'll leave you with this question: what small sign of hope have you overlooked in your own life? Maybe it's a kind word from a friend, a new opportunity, or even the simple fact that you're still here, still fighting. Don't underestimate the power of these moments. They are the seeds of transformation. From hope to transformation, living a life that radiates light and love. Hope, when fully embraced, is not just a fleeting emotion or a comforting thought, it becomes a way of life. It's a shift in perspective that permeates everything you do, transforming how you see yourself, others, and the world. But let's not mistake this transformation for an easy journey. Living a life of light and love requires intentionality, sacrifice, and an unshakable commitment to something greater than yourself. So, how do we move from merely holding on to hope to radiating it outward in a way that transforms not only our own lives but also the lives of those around us? The answer lies in the teachings of Christ. His message was not one of passive faith but of active, radical love. Consider his words: "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again?" These words challenge us to live with purpose and authenticity. Salt that has lost its flavor is useless, it serves no purpose. In the same way, a life devoid of love and hope is unfulfilled. But what does it mean to be salt? How do we retain our essence in a world that often seeks to dilute our light? The key lies in living with intention. Every action, no matter how small, carries the potential to reflect hope and love. Imagine you're walking down a busy street, surrounded by people rushing to their destinations. Most of them are caught up in their own worries, their own struggles. But what if, in that moment, you smiled at a stranger? It's a small gesture, but one that can ripple out in ways you can't even begin to imagine. Maybe that smile reminds them that kindness still exists. Maybe it gives them the strength to face their own battles. Never underestimate the power of small acts of love. But let's go deeper. What about the times when love requires sacrifice? When it asks us to forgive the unforgivable, to give when we feel we have nothing left, to stand up for what is right even when it costs us dearly. These are the moments that define us. These are the moments when hope becomes a force of transformation. Take the story of Martin, a man who discovered that his business partner had been embezzling funds for years. The betrayal was devastating, not just financially but emotionally. Martin had every right to press charges, to seek retribution. But instead, he chose a different path. He confronted his partner, not with anger, but with an offer of forgiveness. He gave him a chance to make amends, to rebuild trust. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But over time, that act of radical love transformed both their lives. Today, they run a nonprofit organization together, helping others overcome financial hardships, Stories like Martin's remind us that love is not a feeling, it's a choice. It's a decision to act in ways that reflect the hope we've embraced. Even when it's difficult. Even when it hurts. And here's the profound truth: when we live with this kind of love, we become mirrors of the divine. We reflect the light of Christ, showing the world that transformation is possible. But what about those moments when we don't feel capable of such love? When the weight of our own struggles leaves us feeling empty, unworthy, or incapable of making a difference? This is where grace enters the picture. Grace is the unmerited favor of God, a reminder that we don't have to do it all on our own. In fact, we can't. The strength to love, to hope, to transform doesn't come from us, it flows through us. As Christ said, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." Think about that for a moment. A branch cannot bear fruit on its own. It must remain connected to the vine, drawing life and strength from it. In the same way, our ability to radiate light and love depends on our connection to something greater. So, let me ask you, what are you connected to? Are you drawing strength from a source that sustains and empowers you? Or are you trying to do it all on your own? This brings us to the practical side of transformation. To live a life that radiates light and love, we must cultivate habits that keep us connected to hope. This might mean starting each day with a moment of reflection or prayer, grounding yourself in gratitude and purpose. It might mean surrounding yourself with people who uplift and challenge you, who remind you of the light within you when you forget. It might mean taking time to serve others, to step outside of your own struggles and make a difference in someone else's life. Let's talk about service for a moment. In a culture that often glorifies self-interest, service is a radical act. It's a declaration that your life is not just about you, that your purpose is tied to the well-being of others. And here's the beautiful paradox: when you serve, you are served. When you give, you receive. When you pour out love, your own cup is filled in ways you never imagined. Consider the story of a nurse named Rachel, who spent her days caring for terminally ill patients. It was emotionally exhausting work, and there were times when she questioned whether she could continue. But one day, a patient told her something that changed her perspective forever: "You make me feel human again." In that moment, Rachel realized that her work was not just about easing physical pain, it was about restoring dignity, hope, and humanity to those who felt forgotten. It was about being a light in their darkest moments. And in giving that light, Rachel found her own renewed. As we near the conclusion of this journey, let's circle back to you. What would your life look like if you fully embraced the hope that defeats evil and transforms your future? Imagine waking up each day with a sense of purpose, knowing that your life has meaning, that your actions matter. Imagine facing challenges not with fear, but with courage, knowing that you are not alone. Imagine being a source of light and love for those around you, inspiring them to find their own hope. But here's the final, most profound question: what's stopping you? Is it fear? Doubt? A belief that you're not enough? Whatever it is, let me remind you of this: the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives in you. You are capable of more than you realize. You are called to more than you can imagine. And the world is waiting for you to step into the fullness of who you are. To embrace the ultimate hope that defeats evil and transforms not just your future, but the future of everyone you touch. Now go. Live the message. Be the light. And watch as the ripples of your hope transform the world.